the men that maybe you meet outside the church, maybe you do get with those guys, but you're not thinking like, okay, this can be my husband because it's not acceptable because I can't present this man to the pastor, and that's interesting because studies also show that there is a low and declining pool of males that actually are interested in going to church, white, black. For decades, studies show that men attended church far less than women. This created a massive mismatch. So a lot of church-going women are looking for partners in the church, but they just really aren't there. And so the researchers and church leaders have openly discussed this imbalance, and the churches are trying to solve the problem, but they're solving it in the wrong way because what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve the problem with an impossible constraint. See, I'm a mathematician too, right? And in mathematics we have something basically that says that the more constraints you put on a solution of a problem, the more suboptimal your solution is going to be. Let me explain that. That means that the more I shackle you in terms of how you can solve the problem, the more I say, you can solve the problem, but you can only look here. You can't look outside the box. You can't think outside the box. You got to be in the box. The more I tell you to solve a problem in the box, the worse your answer is going to be because you're contorting yourself into this really awkward way of solving a really difficult, complex problem. And everything in my being tells you that you're better at solving your problems when you can break away from any unnecessary constraints on how you find the solution. So maybe that means, girl, you better go find your man and find a good one wherever you got to go. Don't let somebody else tell you how to do that because 20 years later, when your life hasn't turned out to be what you want it to be, that those people are not going to be around anymore. They're gone. They won't even remember giving you that advice, right? So basically ultimately, a lot of studies show that certain cultural rules can really delay relationship formation. Churches that emphasize strict sexual morality, like no sex before marriage, strict gender roles, etc., can make dating requirements more rigid because you're putting more constraints on solving the problem. In a lot of communities, it raises the threshold of what counts as an acceptable partner. And in fact, it's not just on the female side. I used to mentor this poor kid at Syracuse, and I remember he was very religious, and I remember him. I met him. I saw him again when he was like 28. And because I'd been kind of like the faculty advisor of a group. I forgot what the group was called, but that's what I did. And so he's really smart. And I talked to him again. He called me when he was about 27, 28 years old. And he told me he met this nice lady that he liked. And I said, okay, so how's it going? And he said, well, I couldn't be with her. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I thought that she was a godly woman. I said, well, okay, well, what happened? And he said, well, we would get together and we would pray together every day, and I thought that she was pure. And I was like, well, what is pure? What does that mean? Because I wanted to tell him, I was like, I don't think most women are really pure. They just kind of make give you that impression, but you know, no, it's I'm you know what I'm telling you. I'm not going to say it, right? And so he said, I thought she was pure, and we would pray together. And then my buddy came to me and he said, man, I have to tell you something. And he said, what? And he said, your girl that you've been praying with every day, who you've been telling that you can't sleep with her because you want purity. He said, twice a week, me and her get together, and I knock the brakes off that lady's body parts, if you know what I mean, right? Then literally they would get together and do what humans do when they're attracted to each other, right? So he's so his of course his friend's devastated. Of course this poor kid, he's shocked.